This week, it's just a short one, but in 1987, Wally Lewis released the book King Wally. It wasn't written by him; it was written by Adrian McGregor.
No, you're saying a footballer had a ghostwriter?
But no, it wasn't even ghostwriter. It was just King Wally by Adrian McGregor.
Oh, right, okay.
On the other side of things, Ray Price released his book, Mr. Perpetual Motion. He did have a ghostwriter. That was Neil Cadigan who wrote that one. And these books both caused like waves of controversy and were like the latest chapter in a long-running feud between Lewis and Price. When I say feud, it was like almost entirely one-sided, with 6 years of Ray Price just bagging out Wally Lewis.
I'm happy to hear this is the History Corner. Nice surprise for me, because you've often said to me in conversation, you've often brought this situation up to me in the past, and it's always been hilarious.
It's just so funny to me, because anytime like Ray Price came out and bagged Wally Lewis, he seemed almost confused by it. And these books go some way towards explaining where this animosity came from. And to his credit, Ray Price did admire Wally Lewis as a player. Well, that's what he'd say anyway. He'd always say, like, I have never said that Wally Lewis wasn't a great player. All I'm saying is, like, he wouldn't cut it in Sydney. Just comments of that ilk. So yeah, two really good books for other reasons, but I wanted to focus specifically on the tension between Wally Lewis and Ray Price and try to unpack where that might have come from. I did just find one quote that like really made me laugh in the Wally Lewis book, so I had to bring it up. The author was talking about one of Wally Lewis's loves outside of football was the Phantom, the comic.
That disappoints me.
So Adrian McGregor asked Wally Lewis, why the Phantom? And Wally said, just the whole setup. He's in a situation where he can't possibly get out, and suddenly he does. And you just laugh and shake your head, and think, he's done it again.
That doesn't seem like Wally Lewis.
I know. It reminds me of Shane Warne talking about Stifler from American Pie.
Oh, Phantom, we've done it again.
But yeah, so going to the feud itself, it seemed like it all started on the 1982 Kangaroo Tour. And both Wally Lewis and Ray Price talk about that tour in some detail. And I'll get to why I think that's where the animosity started. But first, it wouldn't be a tour without some mad tour stories and some prank wars. And on every tour, you've got to have a character. You've got to have an absolute laugh riot. And on both the 78 and 82 tours, that man was Rod Reddy. Ray Price said that he was a dead set stand-up comedian. And Wally Lewis said, he was the number one comedian. No one was even close to him. He knew every joke and every trick. The master of comedy.
Between him and Pryor and the era.
Now, I'm not a comedian, so I'll defer to you on this one, Andrew. But I'm just going to read one of Rod Reddy's best, and you can tell me what you think. He introduced the locals to a game where two players, blindfolded on their hands and knees, were armed with rolled-up newspapers and attempted to bludgeon each other. Reddy and Steve Rogers demonstrated how harmless it was, ducking and weaving and missing more than they hit. Where's the trick? The locals asked suspiciously. No trick, reassured Rod, and eventually a gullible local hung up his tweed jacket and played Rod. Papers ready, blindfolds on, go, called Rogers. At which Rod whipped off his blindfold and belted the pom unmercifully, allowing an occasional block with his arm to encourage his opponent while the pub rocked with laughter. Rod then stood up, retrieved his beer, and put in an occasional whack to an absolute uproar. Eventually, the local, bruised and beaten, took off his blindfold and, a good loser, joined the laughter.
That's got all the hallmarks of a great rugby league prank. no ingenuity, violence, cruelty.
What it is missing is fire danger. And
Oh, that's so funny.
Ray Price, I think this was on the 82 tour as well. Arthur Beetson was there leading a supporters tour. Because was there ever a man better suited to leading a supporters tour than Arthur Beetson?
I would have been the happiest man in the world to go on that tour. How much fun would that have been?
So on a midweek trip, the boys had picked up some fireworks, and Artie was hanging around the hotel. He was just near a lift, so Ray Price got in the lift with some fireworks, took the lift down, the lift opened, he threw the fireworks out, and they exploded, and Artie Beetson shit himself. That, however, wasn't the end of the story. The smoke from the cracker set off the fire alarm. Mayhem broke loose. Everyone was evacuated from the hotel, from the rooms, the lobby, the bars, the restaurant, the casino downstairs. After I finished my laughing fit, I looked out the window and realised what I had sparked. 6 fire engines arrived, and there they all were, standing on the street. Kevin Humphreys, Pressman, a few players and hundreds of residents. I thought if Humphreys found out what had happened, I'd be on the next plane. Nobody dobbed me in. So, lesson learnt, you'd think. But then, actually, I started a bit of a tradition with that prank. On the rest of that tour, and in 1986, there must have been a dozen false alarms with the fire brigade and mass evacuations. They became popular around midnight or 1 a.m. Everyone would be in their dressing gowns freezing on the streets when all was quiet on the 8th floor. Most of the 28 kangaroos tucked safely in their beds.
So this is what I hate about, right? Like, the reputation of rugby league players is terrible, and it's well deserved. I mean, they're just impacting everybody else's enjoyment at a hotel for some stupid prank that only morons would laugh at.
And I think even though the rugby league scandals and atrocities got way worse in the 30 years after Ray Price's retirement, players were at least not so brazen about it too. Just be like, oh, it was so funny. We set off the fire alarm and then...
But it's just this destructive, moronic, it's like vandal culture.
Yeah. Right? It's so because the other trope on tour is the players pooling their money, buying cars and just writing off the cars and,
That went to 1994.
Yeah. Wally Lewis said that his car, they tore all the door handles off, and would scrape the cars along brick walls, and then at the end of the tour they just leave them parked in the hotel car park, to the point where the hotel had to request that they didn't buy any cars next time they stayed there.
Why would anyone want to deal with them? Just like animals.
And then the car that Ray Price had with Mal Menenga, I'll read this. They wheeled around the back of the hotel late one night to the banks of the canal, which was actually the Humber River running through Leeds, so it was pretty deep. A few of the guys picked up the car and hurled it into the canal in a burial service. We couldn't believe it, but just as it started to sink, the headlights came on. None of us could understand why. Just then, some people walked around the corner and the headlights must have grabbed their attention. Everyone instinctively bolted. You threw a car into a river.
This takes the gloss off the tours for me.
Yeah.
It's just a bunch of morons.
And it seems like every tour had a party room. And Ray Price said that Eric Groth's room was that in 82, and they'd have cigar parties where they'd just smoke out the whole floor. But as I said, this 82 tour seems to be where some of Ray Price's disdain for Wally Lewis came to play out, and a lot of that came with Wally Lewis's attitude towards being overlooked for the test spot. So Brett Kenny beat him out for the 5/8 spot, and Wally Lewis was rooming with Steve Mortimer, and Steve Mortimer was kept out by Peter Sterling, because I think partly they wanted to go with the club combination, and then partly Sterling and Kenny are geniuses.
Yeah.
And it seems that Lewis and Mortimer took it really badly and made it really personal and weren't good tourists about the whole thing. Mortimer was constantly complaining and saying, if only we got to go, because like the English teams were weak. Like all we would have needed was one go, and then we could have shown that we were the guys. And it's like, yeah, well, that's all Sterling and Kenny needed, as well.
And they did it.
It's just bad luck. And Ray Price was pretty scathing about Wally Lewis's attitude to training as well, saying he was overweight, a lazy trainer, and compared to Brett Kenny, did not have the form on the board. So Wally Lewis and Steve Mortimer became, drinking buddies to kind of drown their sorrow. And one night they went out to Digby's, the hotel's bar, which was, a favoured watering hole. Came home at like 3 a.m. or whatever. And Steve Mortimer said, "I'm not letting that bastard Stanton get the better." There's Frank Stanton, the coach. "I'm not letting that bastard Stanton get the better of me. I'm going to get back into that side." And then started doing push-ups and sit-ups. And Wally said, "Oh, well, I'm going to bed." And then he got woken up an hour later by Steve Mortimer on the phone to his wife going, "That's Stanton, he's done it to me, and he's done it to Wally too." And so this tour, you saw a real tension between the Kangaroos and the Emus. Whereas some tours, it seems like the Emus are kind of happy to be there and play the midweek games. And
on other tours, there's been a clearer divide in the ranking or the qualities in the Emus, like the younger and but this is like just a star-studded tour.
Yeah, exactly. So you could see where on that tour maybe there'd be more disharmony. But yeah, like a lot of like open defiance to the coach. You had Ian Schubert, Frank Stanton saying, "There's no Kangaroos and Emus. We're all one team, And Ian Schubert said, "Don't worry about him. We're the Emus, and that's that." Like really sulky and like juvenile, and then Greg Kinescu couldn't get into either squad, so he was like going like, "What am I then, a bloody koala?" But credit to Wally, like he eventually realised, well, I can't just sulk. I've got to just actually try to get back on the field, and so he, cut down on the drinking and, came on as a substitute in the later tests and showed the player he was.
But just that line there, like that's big of him to cut down on the drinking on a professional international test tour, like.
And in '87, when Ray Price's book came out, Steve Mortimer, you'd think maybe like with a few years he would have walked back some of his behaviour, but he just said, "I don't want to comment about that tour because there was a lot of political involvement with Price and Sterling."
He's saying that Price got in the 7 jersey.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the inference. But yeah, and then the next year and a half or so, you got to remember this is the start of Origin, and there was a growing animosity between Queensland and New South Wales. And Ray Price seemed to echo the thoughts of a lot of New South Wales fans, I guess, more than players, in saying that anything Wally Lewis did, it was talked about like some genius play, and this idea that Wally was overrated. Ray Price said, "They called Wally the Emperor of Lang Park, and he won so many Man of the Match awards. I honestly thought it must have been written into his contract." I think Wally was embarrassed at times to pick up the awards. And I just read a recent article where Wally Lewis said that it was actually Ray Price who gave him the name the King. And so it was a bit of a derisive kind of label.
Wow.
Yeah.
They ran with it.
Yeah.
But, Ray Price is the ultimate speak your mind, isn't he?
Mm.
This is great looking back on it.
Yeah.
Instead of saying all the rubbish we hear today.
It's funny because, so Ray Price and Steve Mortimer in '87 both had columns in Rugby League Week. And, Ray Price had just retired, but Steve Mortimer was still playing. And Steve Mortimer would openly say, "Oh, I'm not really worried about Easts, they beat us, but I don't think they're a really good team." They'd actively say these things and bait opposing players.
Crazy, yeah.
And this was the first time Ray Price publicly bagged out Wally Lewis was, I think, before the 83 Origin series, where he, not for the last time, came out and said that Wally Lewis wouldn't make it in the Sydney competition. And Wally Lewis, famous for needing an occasion to rose to it and like destroyed New South Wales that night in Origin.
I bet you're not happy with Price after that, the Blues.
So the exact quote was, Wally Lewis would not hold down a first grade spot in Sydney. He wouldn't take the grind week in and week out down here. New South Wales will have no trouble handling Lewis.
In fairness to Price, I know he come at the end of his career, but he didn't really set the Sydney comp on fire.
No, yeah. But it's one of those eternal what-ifs, isn't it? And I mean, I don't think there's much doubt that he would have been a champion if he did come down earlier.
He's an immortal, for God's sakes. But it's different. He didn't come up through the lower grades here. He didn't have that grind built in, you know.
But yeah, this is what I'm talking about with Ray Price always attempting to say that he's not bagging out Lewis and then bagging out Lewis. In his Rugby League Week column, he said that he has no personal vendetta with Wally Lewis. That's nonsense. I just think it's wrong that so much attention is paid to Wally that he doesn't deserve. The game is bigger than that. Wally has never had the dedication that a competition like Sydney requires.
Let me ask you this about the feud. If it was anybody but Ray Price, would have Wally arced up way harder? Because, I mean, this guy's a psycho.
Yeah.
Tough guy.
Yeah. But I think also, as we'll see when the book finally comes out, like Wally Lewis is by no means the only person that Ray Price goes on the attack with. And to a man, everyone was like, oh, you know, Ray, like, you know, he's a bit of an idiot, but like, oh my God, he's a good player. You know?
Yeah.
I think it's just that universal respect.
Yeah.
And, you know, when Wally Lewis named his best ever New South Wales team a couple of years ago, Ray Price was there at lock.
Yeah. I mean, obviously respected for the play, legendary figure and everything, but is also a tough guy.
And that animosity between New South Wales and Queensland, which was already kind of like coming to a head, like when, you know, went off the boil with the Terry Fernley thing in 1985, where he was New South Wales and Australian coach in a test series against New Zealand, dropped 4 Queensland players and the shit hit the fan.
They never learnt from that either, whether they had the Chris Anderson affair later. Yeah. It's like, that should have been the end of that ever happening again, that Fernley incident.
Absolutely. Like, I think they should have already known, and it definitely showed that Australian Rugby League doesn't have the maturity to have a state coach also being the national coach. But in saying that, like, the Queenslanders' response to Terry Fernley being coach and the dropping of the Queensland players is just absolutely shameful. All right, so Chris Close was one of the Queensland players that got dropped. And it all started when Terry Fernley said to Chris Close, I want to play you on the wing for the third test. And Chris Close said, well, mate, I'm not really a winger. I haven't played much wing. I'd much prefer to play in the centres. And Fernley just said, okay, right. And drops him. This is all coming from Wally Lewis's book. And then Close went up and told Fernley off. He said, that's the biggest kick in the guts I've ever copped in my life. Was I to blame for the team's performance? No, said Fernley. He simply believed Steve Ella would brighten up the backline. Why at my expense? Was I the worst back? No, said Fernley. He was happy with Chris's play. Well, you could have fooled me, said Close. Why didn't you just say you're on the wing? You didn't give me a chance. I'll play wing, fullback, front row. I'm shattered. I've played 2 tests. We've won both and I've been dropped. You've stuffed up the record for me. I love that, like, you know, you never gave me a chance. Like, you asked me to play wing, but I said I didn't want it, but I didn't say I wouldn't. Now you've dropped me.
I mean, if that's how it was treated, like the coach had such little authority.
And yeah, like they were just openly
Hostile.
defying him, openly hostile. Like they won the second test, but they didn't play particularly well. And Mark Murray, so they won the second test in that series against New Zealand, but they didn't play particularly well. And Terry Fearnley got in there and like blew up at them and said, that was a shit performance. And Mark Murray, who was the Queensland and Australian halfback, just said, "Why don't you just shut up and get stuffed? We've just won the test match and we're having a celebration. If you want to get up us tomorrow."
Christ almighty.
And then these blokes had the gall, after all of that, to go up to Fearnley and say, like, you dropped these guys, but you didn't talk to us. And Fearnley said, well, you guys are kind of unapproachable. And fair enough. Like, if you're the Australian coach, you should be able to rise above that. And maybe he wasn't the right man to be in the position at that time. But Mark Murray said, like, well, you're the coach. It was your job to build the team or whatever. And Fearnley said, yeah, I should have told the blokes that I was dropping him, but I didn't feel confident enough to approach you blokes. You've been so distant.
What a tragic affair that was.
And it's so funny how close we came to going down that path again a couple of years ago with the Queensland dominance in the team.
Yeah.
I mean, that was like more of a like imbalance in the team because of how many great players they had. But the whole incident with the Queensland team song, like, it really could have gone down the same path. And
yeah.
I mean, we give credit to Mal like every episode, but like give credit to him again.
It needed him there.
Yeah.
I mean, anyone less than Mal. God.
And I love in Ray Price's book when Wally Lewis said that Ray Price thinks he has a God-given right to criticize people. Ray Price said, "It's possibly because when I'm asked to comment on something or someone, I don't beat around the bush. I know I'm not very diplomatic, but I'm paid to pass comment in Rugby League Week, and I give them as I see them. I speak what I think is the truth, and if the truth hurts, that's someone else's bad luck, not mine. It's a big boys game, and if you can't swim, you shouldn't go in the deep end."
What a legend.
And I love the lineage of like hard-nosed former forwards who talk straight in the press after their playing days.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It seems to like go all the way back, and like I want to find the first one. Like,
we had Mark Carroll tonight.
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, Ray Steer was like a player, like hard forward who went on to be like a controversial kind of figure. You had Rex Mossop, you had Noel Kelly, you had
Bumper Farrell.
Yeah, well, I think he had more pressing matters with the goings on at Darlinghurst.
But I mean, it probably happened from 1908.
Yeah. But yeah, so the books came out and just unleashed a furor. Like Wally Lewis's came first. The big thing was his criticism of the Fearnley era and Wayne Pearce in particular. The idea coming from Queensland was that Wayne Pearce was intimately involved in selection matters, and that Queenslanders couldn't get a fair deal. And Wally Lewis copped a lot of heat for that, for publicly bagging out a teammate like that, to the point where like there were calls for him to be stripped of the captaincy. The ARL board had to talk about it at a meeting. Like Ken Arthurson said that we'll get together and discuss the issue. I think he ended up getting like a fine or something.
I wonder if they still have heat to this day.
Yeah,
Pearce and Lewis.
It wouldn't surprise me. One of my have I got the quote? I think it was Wayne Pearce and Peter Wynn were dubbed the Suck Brothers because of their perceived close relationship with Terry Fearnley.
Oh my God, it's worse than the Bash Brothers.
Yeah, but so Ray Price made his feelings known on the matter after Wally's book came out. He said, I admit I've only read the newspaper extracts and been told of all the things Wally has supposedly said, so I can't make a real judgment. But if those claims are true, he should not just be sacked as captain, he should be dropped altogether from the test side. And, that's, reasonable. He said, well, I haven't read the book, so I can't really comment about it. I'm going to comment about it, but as I said, I haven't read the book. When his book came out several months later, he said, I hope all the critics, particularly that bloke Frank Crook, read my book Perpetual Motion, because it was obvious none of them had when they felt free to brand the book nothing but a whinge last week.
I'm gonna be on the side of Frank Crook. It sounds like a perpetual whinge.
And Ray Price said, I know they couldn't have read it because the first copies off the presses didn't arrive until last Friday for the official launch. So it wasn't even on sale, Frank Crook couldn't even gone and bought one. So how would he know? But one of the people, he didn't bag him out, but Jack Gibson, he didn't even, it wasn't even criticism. It was just saying that maybe some of his success is a bit overblown and he had help. And I'm reading this especially for you, Andrew. I made a mistake, as everyone does, in the way I tried to get my point across about Jack Gibson's right-hand man, Ron Massey.
That's one of the funniest and saddest tropes ever. Poor Ron Massey, the right-hand man.
Do you think that's on his gravestone?
I hope not. Love Ron Massey.
So the back and forth went on, and in Ray Price's attack on Wally Lewis, he came. I actually think he's on the money here. He said, "I'm not going to duck for cover over what has been said in my book, not like Wally Lewis did after the controversy over King Wally. I suppose the big difference is that mine is an autobiography, not a biography. I didn't load the gun for someone else to fire." And Wally Lewis did attempt to obfuscate some of the controversy, saying I didn't write it.
Yeah, right.
So I think Ray Price had a valid point then.
You want to talk about reputation though? Everybody in the world would respect Ray Price.
One of the people he attacked in the book was Warren Ryan.
Surprise, surprise.
I liked Warren Ryan had a couple of rebuttals. One, it's no secret that Ray Price is not fond of Canterbury, even though it is in that district that he and his family chose to live. But he's got him there. And then he said, Price admits he does not know what sort of person I am, which is extremely fair of him since we have never met. He says I seem to be pretty volatile, arrogant, and controversy appears to attend my efforts, or words to that effect. My reply to that is simply that I do not really know what sort of person Price is either, but I'm willing to suggest that he may well have been describing himself without realizing.
Genius.
But yeah, so both really good reads, and what's an even better read is reading Rugby League Weeks and newspaper reports from that year and just seeing this constant slanging match between them.
It seems like the slanging matches died down a little.
Yeah.
You get the odd one, but you don't get a career.
They seem to patch it up really quickly.
Yeah.
Even Gus and Sticky, that could have been one for the ages.
I went for 5 years though. Intense 5 years.
Yeah. Gal's always good for a couple.
Yeah, but they sort of have a little jab here and there, and then it sort of goes away. That's character assassination over a period of years.
But anyway, yeah, that's History Corner for the week.
Great one, man.